Hi, everyone. Nice to see you this Sunday afternoon. As the trailer says, it's Other Israel Film Festival. It's my most wonderful time of the year. I guess you share that since you're here. It's a really unique space for conversation. And as the trailer said, screenings, discussions, events. So this is in the discussions, mishbetzet, the discussions category. Before we start, I really do want to thank the whole team at Other Israel Film Festival and at the JCC, who makes it all feel so much easier than it feels in the real world outside. So thank you. I'm Libby Linkinski. I'm Vice President for Public Engagement at the New Israel Fund and the founder of a new organization called Albi, which supports arts and culture for social and political change in and about Israel. So this feels like a home for me, and it's a real honor and pleasure to be in conversation with my dear friends to the left, pun intended, the founders and kind of central organizers of the Israelis for Peace group here in New York City. Thank God for it. Thank God for you. I think I speak on behalf of many. And I think the way to start is to really just ask each of you to introduce yourself and in so doing, also tell us what sort of catalyzed you into organizing yourselves and other Israelis here in New York at this time. And we can start anywhere you want. Noah, Tamar, Tamara. We didn't plan to be this color coordinated, but I'm kind of tickled by it.
I'll start because I was at the very beginning. The way that we came about was extremely just rolling with the punches and kind of the definition of grassroots, which meant that after October 7th, a bunch of us found that we have nowhere to protest and nowhere to mourn. Having lost loved ones on October 7th and also as anti-occupation activists from before, already having connections with people on the ground, also in Gaza. And to be in that predicament where you could maybe mourn your dead, but you have to pay a price of pretending the Gazans don't exist, or you can demand the return of the hostages and, and kind of, really pretend that that's the whole picture. On the other hand, we weren't feeling comfortable going to protests behind banners like by any means necessary. We weren't comfortable going to anything that was nationalist or anything that doesn't uphold human rights and the value of human life. So we decided to create our own vigil. We did that already in November. And in that, we were reading, testaments from Gaza and also discussing the horrible events of October 7th and also talking about the hostages and also already saying that hostage release and ceasefire are the very same request and not opposing things as propaganda is trying to tell us and as unfortunately most people have agreed to. So we created our first vigil and 200 people came and we were in the New York Times the following day. So it was really clear that there is a need for this kind of narrative and for this kind of space. From there on, we moved to a weekly model in January when it became clearer that the war is not actually going to end anytime soon. That's the beginning.
And you.
Oh,
Who are you?
My name is Tamar Glazerman. I am from Tel Aviv. I have lived here for 14 years. My personal story is on both sides of the border. On the Israeli side, I lost my aunt, Hannah, on October 7th. She was murdered by Hamas. She was 88 years old. And on the other side of the border, I have a friend who I'm running kind of direct aid program with for the past 8 years. And through her, I've met other women in Gaza. And the positionality between those two sides of the border is what brings me here and keeps me here.
Tamar's also being humble, so I'll just say she's a very celebrated filmmaker here in New York and also was doing filmmaking work and journalism in Israel before moving here. If anyone else needs help filling in the bios, I'm a publicist.
We should say that all the organizers are artists, and it's a question we often get. And maybe that's how we get to be sort of creative and responsive to the situation, and how we're evolving the protest and kind of creating a platform for all the activists, Palestinian, Israeli, who we're very fortunate to be in New York City, so a lot of them come through here. But this position of people from the land who can see solutions, which are not either or solutions, is a position which is not heard enough here. So we've really evolved into a platform for them, and we are, really humbled and also very happy to be able to do that. And that's maybe another part of our evolution. So, no, we each have activist and organizing things in our background, but each of us represents a different art. And should say who I am. My name is also Tamara. It's a little bit of an inside joke in our group where we're going to make everyone change their name to some version of Tamal. And I am a public artist, and I do all sorts of things in the public space, both in New York and throughout the US. And I've probably been in New York the longest of everyone, since the 90s. But my family is still in Israel, and I still go back all the time. And, like everyone, really ties to the devastation, both to what's happening on the left. I personally have a friend and an artistic collaborator who was at the Nova Dance Festival and didn't make it out. So we all come from this, from both personal and, as Tamar said, there really just is a need in New York City and a need in each of us. And, beyond the importance of a methodology, we also really provide a place weekly where people who feel the need can charge up and then go out and do other things around this kind of thinking throughout the city.
So Tamara mentioned that we're all artists. So I'm the musician in the group, and that was kind of the way I joined Israelis for Peace originally, when it wasn't Israelis for Peace. So I happened to be in Israel on October 7th, and in the first month of the war, I was there and hearing the voices of how people were listening to protest here in the US, and hearing the word ceasefire was a very very loaded word, and it wasn't really accepted, and it looked upon in a very, very negative way. And when I came here, on one hand, I was still traumatized from, of course, experiencing the first few weeks of the war and being in the shelter and everything that we all know about. And at the same time, being a past organizer of the protests against the judicial overhaul, I was kind of in that world already. So Yael, one of the other co-founders of Israelis for Peace, who is not here today, approached me to ask if I would help organize. And I was just not ready to sit under the title ceasefire, as November was just a few weeks after everything happened. So I was feeling that, but at the same time knew that it might be the right place. So I wasn't ready to be an organizer. I just joined as a musician at first, and we held those first couple of vigils with live music, and then eventually I understood that for me, a ceasefire is really the only way, ceasefire and hostage deal. Really, there's no other way to reach where we still need to reach. So that's how I joined this amazing group of people.
Thank you. And please say your name.
I realized my name is Noah, and I'm a musician, and I moved here 2013, so 11 years.
And I'll also say you should look up Noah Folt on social media, because there's no voice like this one. It's musically also just for people who are music lovers. I'll say that myself, I grew up mostly here in an Israeli house, a kibbutznik house. And my sense of belonging came through more of an Israeli expat than an American Jewish, which didn't feel I never knew how to articulate that difference until adulthood. And working at the New Israel Fund, I was like, oh, this is the perfect embodiment, because it's about there, but it's happening here. And still there was a gap. And so for me, I've sort of always looked around for opportunities to be organized here as an Israeli, not just as a Jew. And that distinction is something that there have been volumes of books and academic work written about. But in my personal life, it just was, it felt different to be among Israelis here than among Jews here. Not better or worse, just different. And Tamar and I, full disclosure, she is one of my closest friends here in New York and always. And, you know, we've like gotten looped into other efforts of Israelis over the years, whether it was in 2014 or 2021. And I want to ask, and Noah, you mentioned also organizing around the judicial coup, which many of us were out in the streets protesting the Netanyahu government way before October 7th, still the same government in power today. But what is the relationship between what you've been doing since October 7th and those other kinds of Israeli expat initiatives that happen in the US over this last decade, whether it's IAC or the Unacceptable group or the judicial coup groups? I mean, is it the same people? Is it different people? Like, what's the relationship?
So the relationship is, I think there's a few layers to this. First, in a way, in a very good way, it created a platform, something that already existed. The community already existed. So once things happened, and October 7th happened, we already had this pool of people to work with. But that pool of people is also very specifically, it came out of those groups and distinct itself in a distinct way, because our people, I should say, right, the anti-occupation Black people, this is where Israelis for Peace is basically coming from. We're a group of people who were distinct from the rest of the Unacceptable or the other movement in the sense that we wanted to talk about the occupation. It's not just a judicial overhaul. We can ignore that. This is really the elephant in the room that was being ignored, and we thought it cannot. So this is this relationship of distinction, but also using it as the platform to start from, which I think made it really easier for us to organize people around Israelis for Peace, because we already had this good base to start from. And maybe you want to add to that, or any of you.
Well, I don't know if I have anything to add about where we came from in that sense, but I do want to say that post-October 7th, there is a lot of additional organizing, both Israeli and non-Israeli, which they also, you know, we can feel how we kind of satisfied a need and are a very strong voice for different people. So, you know, we can see it on our social media. You know, I myself wear a bunch of different organizing hats, including very majorly the New York chapter of Friends of Standing Together, which is not predominantly Israeli, and in many ways also has a lot of what we would call just Americans who are looking for, they're not necessarily Palestinians, they're not necessarily Jews, although we have, obviously. But they are looking for voices and solutions of people who say there is a way to really create something even better for both people, right? So to use the language of that other movement, no one's going anywhere, and we present all the solutions for that. And so we're both taking from that pool of people who were established during the judicial overhaul, especially those people who, from the beginning, it was very easy for them to say, there is a judicial overhaul because of the occupation. Mm-hmm. And we're developing it from there. And our circles have really expanded.
I just want to add credit where credit is due. The pins that we're all wearing are from the Israeli anti-occupation bloc. Mine reads, "Occupation kills all hope." Theirs read, "There's no security with occupation." And this is a bloc that started in Israel in order to remind the protests there of, you know, the elephant in the room, and we replicated that here. We didn't, still we have to give all the respect to the people on the ground, first and foremost because they're also really getting arrested for it. So just to acknowledge the bravery of the people doing the real work.
Go ahead.
And also I just wanted to say that all the things that we bring really are strongly tied to solutions on the ground, because like all leftist movements everywhere, the slogan that organizing is local and solutions in many ways are local, are not lost in us. And in fact, we want to promote and highlight that here.
Thank you. And I'll just say, as some of you know, the ones who know me know that at this time of year I become a full-time moderator of panels about this issue, both because it's the end of year fundraising for all the NGOs and they're all in town, and because it's the Other Israel Film Festival, the most wonderful time of the year. And so just this week we had conversations with Chagai Matar, the executive director of 972 Magazine and Sicha Mekomit. Avi Dabush is on the way. The co-directors of Standing Together are here. Films galore. And we were talking about two things that tie into this. One was the relationship between the anti-occupation bloc and the bigger judicial coup, pro-democracy protests in Israel, and how even there was a turning point, which connects up with what you're talking about, that this was very small and sometimes met with a lot of antagonism on the ground, people showing up, in a sea of Israeli flags with something that says Dai Kibush, and the occupation. It was not always just warmly embraced. But then
with Palestinian flags, not just,
yes.
That was a main deal.
That was a big part of it, and people, cops ripping flags out of people's hands, arresting people, etc. But then there was what we came to commonly refer to as a pogrom in the West Bank town of Hawara, and it was captured on video with settlers torching, burning, and looting, and also engaging in violence against Palestinian residents of Hawara, then sort of taking a break to pray. And it really struck a chord among many, many people here and also there on the ground, and we started to see the anti-occupation bloc grow at that time. And I think that connects up with what Israelis for Peace is doing as things on the ground get worse and much harder to defend, to have this container in this space. But I also remember that when we were protesting in the pro-democracy framework as the anti-occupation bloc here, there was one big protest outside of the consulate here in New York that included the Israeli organizing groups along with all of us, all of New Israel Fund and Trua and J Street and AP, Americans for Peace Now, and there was this funny culture gap because all of our speakers were rabbis and organization leaders, and we were swaying and doing yai da 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 da, and then the Israeli groups had kids and artists, and then they were all in these masses going achi, 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 puza, it was a very, and I'm wondering now, I'm sort of raising it in a lighthearted way, but as you're organizing and you're trying to bring out a strong Israeli anti-occupation left-wing ceasefire peace voice, how does that relate to the counterparts in the American Jewish left? Culturally, politically, are they coming to the protests also? Do you work together? When you do, does it mush into one thing, or is it still, what is the relationship there with all of the sort of American Jewish activism that also exists along these messages?
I mean, it's a work in progress for sure, but I think that our rationale is kind of leaning into the fact that we're Israelis and using that as a way to legitimize our voice to some. And on the opposite side of that, it's kind of, sometimes from the left, it's going to become a illegitimate identity. So that, again, is another reason to just say who you are and where you're from and what you want without trying to cater too much to what is being expected of you. And there's an audience for that. And as we were organizing the protests, we were kind of figuring out how to be the most inclusive and inviting to American audiences. And if that means that we are having a lot of rabbis and a lot of the spiritual side of Judaism, which is such a cornerstone in American Judaism, but is almost entirely doesn't really exist in Israeli secular leftists. So that's news. It's new for us. I can say that personally, I've heard more rabbis this year than I've heard my entire life before. I learned a lot about Jewish values this year that I did not learn in Israel. So we're trying to just create a space in which we always say organized by Israeli peace activists, inclusive and open to everyone. A part of, not having flags is a part of that as well. To try to be open and inclusive to everyone. Not that there's not a bar, there is a bar. There are spaces for people who are against the occupation, against the siege, and against apartheid. We're not whitewashing any of that. But if you agree to that, then, it's definitely the space for you.
Yeah. Tamara, you have anything to add on that as the most embedded in also the American political left, organizing-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are trying to use our identity to make what's going on the ground and both the possible solutions over there and what we need to do here a very real thing. I mean, I think both within the Jewish community, but in the left in general, and maybe in general in America, because this is happening somewhere else in a different culture. And it's become a very, very abstract war of words for the most part. And Noah sort of mentioned it at the beginning when people were debating what ceasefire means. Now, historically, if you look at what ceasefires are, they are always agreements, right? Politicians get together and they make some documents. It's not just like, oh, you have to put down your arms and you do whatever you want. That's not actually a ceasefire. So, but here people really, every month there's some new word that people are debating. We all know what they are, whether it's ceasefire or Zionism or apartheid or genocide. It seems more important for a lot of people here to say the right word as opposed to being active, whether it's on the street or with your representatives or in the variety of ways that Americans writ large have access to. And what we're here is to bring the realism of it, and realism that will actually bring this to a solution. Because this level of violence, regardless of what you call it, is devastating, obviously for Palestinians. As we've seen over the months, the numbers are staggering. Whole families wiped off that will, there is no more that family. I mean, that's inconceivable in many ways, but also on the Israeli side, devastating to the future of both Jews in Israel, to any pretense at democracy, and to the level of violence that people live with internally. So none of these things can be underestimated. And I think that's really our job, to bring kind of the real deal.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm reminded, unfortunately, of a call that I had with a young American Jewish activist early on who was calling me, like so many have before her and after her, to just voice extreme outrage in what I had written or not written for NIF, and whether we had gotten the magic word right at the right moment or missed the boat on that. And I said plainly, well, if we had said that thing a week ago as opposed to when we did say it, would it have saved anyone's life? And she said, well, could anything save anyone's life? And I said, well, my friend has been organizing direct aid with Gazans and raising money here to support their everyday living needs for 8 years. That might. And then she said, is that friend a Zionist? And then I said, I think we may have lost the plot in this conversation. I'm not sure what we're talking about anymore. And I think I want to ask a little bit about back home in Israel. I don't assume that you consider it still your home. I still do. And what the response has been there among Israelis to the existence of this group and the growth of the group. I mean, Tamar, you said it was in the New York Times the day after the first vigil. So our friends in Israel, or our enemies in Israel, as it may be, also know about this. And I wonder what your friends and family and what the press in Israel, what's the relationship into what's happening? Not what's happening in Gaza, but what's happening with Israelis for peace.
Well, yeah, I don't think there's been a lot of press about us in Israel, unfortunately. There has been some articles in Haaretz, like little things, but when the organizations that pass through New York come to speak at our protest, usually the response we get is, this is amazing. Like, you're giving us so much power, energy. It's so meaningful to know that you exist. So it does feel very relevant to the organizations there on the ground. And that's one thing I want to say. But on the personal level, I can share that, to me, it took me a while to sort of come out in front of my family and share that I'm one of the organizers of this. And I really say come out because I was scared to share it with them. I come from a leftist family, but I would say leftist Zionist. And given the very biased media in Israel and the way the events in Gaza are reported, or I should say not really reported in the past year in the media in Israel, they really just didn't understand how I'm coming with this angle, like how am I part of this? It was really hard for them to accept at first. I think now they see it, or okay, we'd rather not really go into depth and really talk about what's going on, and we just accept that you do it, but let's not have the actual discussions. So that, for me, has been a little hard. But I think we share the same values. It's just that they're there, and it's much harder to see the bigger picture, maybe the way we can sort of see it here in a more privileged and safe way. We're not under constant rockets like they have been for a while, and we're not under this horrible government, which they have been suffering under for a while. So I also have a lot of compassion for them, and yeah, that's it.
Either of you?
I think it's been interesting to look at this from an Israeli perspective of being on the ground. And because we kind of recognize that we're in a really privileged spot and that it doesn't sound so good to hear from the comfortable what you should be doing under war, we really, like a broken record, repeat the fact that we are first and foremost here to amplify and support the changemakers on the ground. That is our first mandate. And on a personal level, I feel like if we didn't care about what's happening in Israel, we would have been at home right now, enjoying like a day of Netflix. Like, we are doing this for our families. And sometimes it's clear to them and sometimes it isn't. But in the wider scheme of things, I, amongst us, deal with the beautiful hell of social media. So I hear a lot of things. I see a lot of things. And one thing that's kind of repeating sometimes is, how dare you say this from all the way over there? And to that, I can only say that I also said it when I was there. And I was told that if I don't like it, I can go fuck off, pardon my French. And I did. And I'm saying the exact thing from here. So maybe it's the thing that's being said and not where you're saying it from.
And I'd also just like to add that there are a few other effects, and really also hats off to Tamar, who really spearheaded this. But there are similar protest efforts in a variety of cities all over the world based on our format. And
on our files.
Yes, and exactly.
Our
on all of our materials, it's like the toolkit for how to do something like this. And, you know, Tamar was really helming getting this out, because we do feel like we have kind of synthesized a really good point, and we're proud of that. And we see it, you know, we've not only had activists, we've had representatives, Palestinian representatives from the West Bank. We've also had representatives from the hostage families, and being able to kind of hold all those people and give them a place where they really can, you know, not only feel seen, but have their voice kind of platformed outside of Israel is just really, really crucial. You know, on a personal level, I'm maybe one of the privileged ones where some members of my family consider me barely left. So
Same.
Yeah, and when I lose compassion for a moment for Israelis, even some of my own family members who don't understand certain aspects of my politics here, I tap back into this moment I had with my 6-year-old niece. In our family, we do a lot of video calls on WhatsApp, and the kids are so proficient that like they've been calling me independently since they were babies on their mother or their father's phone. And we've moved around a lot, so we do like tours of wherever we are, whatever apartment we're in. They went to Greece after October 7th for a month. Every day they would call to show me the house, everything, the closets, whatever. And I moved to a new apartment, my husband and I, like 3.5 months ago, and my 6-year-old niece Lev got obsessed with me giving her tours on the video. And then she started asking, but Doda, where's your mamad? Where's your bomb shelter? And like just sort of curious, like, where's the oven? And where's your closet? And where's your bomb shelter? And I had this like dilemma. Do I tell her that I don't have one because I don't need one? Only she needs one, and it's important for her to know where hers is, but it's not important to know where mine is. No. So I just made my husband's office into the mamad for the purpose of my 6-year-old niece. And every time that I feel that outrage of critique about what Israelis are and aren't saying, I just think of my 6-year-old niece asking me, where's my bomb shelter? And I'm like, okay, this is for me to talk about, and they need to get through this time as they are as well. I want to ask you, and I ask everyone that I moderate this, if you're successful and the vision that you have for how things could be there and also how things could be for us as Israelis here in relationship to there, what does it look like? Like, what's different in the world and in our lives between where we are now and where we would be then if you were successful?
Everything.
Our
Exactly.
Sundays will be free.
Netflix parties on Sundays.
I
Let's
know.
start with that.
Well, I mean, we all have a very, very specific end goal. And I think October 7th started us together as a group, but this war, we already know, won't stop us because till we achieve peace, we're not stopping. And that's what will be different, and I think there is no other answer, really.
I mean, on the macro level, yeah, it's peace. And by that, we don't mean like a kumbaya peace. We mean like a just, equal, self-definition kind of peace, which is important to add because the word peace is kind of funny and maybe unclear and maybe even a little hokey at this point, but the alternative is much, much worse. So we'll go with peace. On a micro level, or like on a closer level, I think that our goal is to mobilize as many well-meaning Americans to support as many or as needed forces on the ground, because it is horrifying to be a leftist in Israel. It was always not a good deal, and now it is actually dangerous and scary. And these people, our friends and our families, need support both financial and public messaging-wise. And that would be our most initial goal, is to have as much of that we can harness and kind of funnel. And what that looks like on the ground, what peace looks like, I don't know, should I start crying? Like, should we all try to imagine what peace looks like? Maybe we should.
If not today, then yes, we should, in general, I think. Because I think as a filmmaker, Rami Younis, who made the film Lid in Exile, which has been in New York, but is missed the timeline or something for this, there's a whole thing in there where he talks about, in the film, where he talks about political imagination, however remote the possibilities feel, is also in and of itself an act of resistance. And so I try to tell myself that too. So I want to see what else is in the room and see if there are questions or thoughts that people want to share. There's a roving mic, and then I'll take my moderator's privilege to ask the last question.
I realize, talking to you, that I'm so interested in the culture question. I'm a liberal rabbi, and I'm also a Syrian Jew. And one part of me is really left out of these circles and these protests, or the protests I've been involved with both here and in Israel. And I'm wondering, and this is a question that I'm interested in terms of America as well, how might we expand either the language or the culture or the activism in a way to reach people who are not privileged in a certain way and not Ashkenazi and not hyper-educated?
Like in the United States, you mean?
Either. Either. I think it's true in both places.
I'll jump in just quickly to start us off on this. I think it's a super important question. I think it might be like the super important question because what we think of as the liberal left, Jewish American and also Israeli, is shrinking not only because people are turning rightward, but because other people are having more babies than secular, liberal, urban families. And so I personally try to get involved with initiatives that can bridge between people on the ground, not only from the purpose and perspective of like dialoguing to talk through difference and find the common good, but towards making people's lives materially better. So there's like labor organizing that crosses divides. There's other kinds of like cultural organizing and language organizing as well that isn't just about let's get in the room together, Ashkenazi and Mizrahi, or religious and secular, and talk about our differences, but let's find an area of common interest that we can promote together. So minimum wage, which Standing Together was a part of, and also Koach La'ovdim, the grassroots unionizing movement in Israel, was very intersectional. But it wasn't about that. It wasn't about the multiculturalism of society. It was about achieving a goal that is relevant to so many different people's lives. So what about you?
But there's also a way, and I think it's already in what we do, and it goes back to what I said before, which is we are trying to make this a very, very real issue. So, for example, when you say not hyper-educated, I translate that in my mind as poor. And I think there's a lot of stereotypical kind of misrepresentations of people in different classes, but because we're trying to make this a very real issue, we always use very direct language. This is not an academic exercise. And you also see that reflected in the various types of speakers that come to speak in our protests, and even on the weeks when there is no outside speaker, when we're doing it all ourselves, the way we present the news and the issues and how we structure the activity, it really is made in this very direct way that is really meant to be grasped initially. So there are not the same barriers as some of the ones that you're discussing.
I can also say that meeting people where they are is a challenge, but it's something that we do challenge ourselves to do all the time. And this is an earlier question. In 2014, a bunch of us, actually Yael and Tal and myself, who did the first few vigils, we were organizing during Protective Edge in 2014, which at the time was the most brutal assault on Gaza and now looks horrifyingly quaint. And what we did then was we wrote a public letter to American Jews that was then published in kind of mainstream American Jewish publications like The Forward, arguing that we understand the connection to Israel and we respect it and we're not going to argue anyone's emotions. But we will argue that what being pro-Israel means. And maybe we should turn it to being pro-Israeli. And maybe if you're so pro-Israel, be pro my right to live a normal life and not kill and not die in someone else's wars. So that was, perhaps a little bit more middle of the road than my actual politics. I believe in that, but that's not the whole picture. But that attempt was targeting a specific audience that we wanted to talk to. And we still do. So it kind of depends who we're addressing. We're in a kind of interesting position to get both support and hate, both from the right and from the left. So depending on the specific thing that we're trying to do, that would inform also the language. But the language, like Tamara said, is very direct and honest and doesn't go through like a think tank of messaging. It's literally just what we want to say.
Yeah, maybe we can leave Franz Fanon out of it. Just this
Just
at this
this once,
yeah. And I might be thinking about this because our friend Slil, who's another organizer in Israelis for Peace, walked in wearing a red scarf, no less. But it reminds me a little bit of some conversations that were happening around the veganism movement in Israel, which for a long time was sort of avant-garde in activism, and sort of the discussion around it was highly academic and theoretical. And then it was one of the movements that had the most success in just sweeping everyday people, whether to become fully plant-based in their eating or to reduce the amount of non-sustainable foods that they're consuming. And it happened through this very sort of direct, here's what you can do, here's what it means, take it out of the clouds, change some of the nomenclature to be very accessible. So we've seen that style of organizing really, really work. Okay, other questions?
We have a question.
Pardon me. About a year ago, I saw on YouTube a video of Israelis being interviewed, voicing the most racist, nationalist, vile, hating attitudes, and they seem like, normal folks. Has there been an effort to gather, perhaps off camera, Israelis who are willing to say what you're saying? And Palestinians also. One could get the impression here on the left that all leftists feel that there shouldn't be an Israel. I wonder whether Palestinians think that, or whether they think it's realistic to think that. What do they really want?
May I? There's a big divide between voices on the ground, even on the Palestinian side, and diaspora movements. And of course, I can't speak for either, but I can, quote conversations that I've had. I just came back from a big peace conference in Berlin. It was half Palestinian, half Israelis. And these are people who've really devoted their whole lives to this, from Gaza, from the West Bank, from 48 Israel. And none of the people in the room would have been welcomed at the Columbia encampment. So that's weird, right? Because if we look at the statistics right now, there's around a combined support of 60% to a two-state solution inside the Palestinian population. If that makes them all Zionists, then I don't know what we're doing with this discussion and how we're growing from it. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. But as for the Israeli people who don't say the horrible racist things, they exist. They're our friends, they're our families, we all know them. We do need to hear them, but we have a very, very serious problem of being ruled by an algorithm. And that algorithm does not promote nice, respectful, humanistic voices. No, it will promote the worst people who have ever opened their mouth on both sides. And that impacts how we all perceive all of this. And we need to also remember that 99% of people never write anything on social media. We're looking at a very specific part of the population, and because it's so inflaming, we allow ourselves to imagine that that is reality. It goes both ways. If you talk to an average Israeli right now, they think the student encampments are going to straight up come to our houses and kill us. It's been really fear-mongered on both sides. So the one thing we can do, we can look for the voices. The voices exist. It just means to do a slightly deeper dig, even on social media. And where our expectations are around Hamas objectors in Gaza, we have to remember that that is a life-threatening position to take, whether it's public or it's not public.
We should say that, sorry, I just want to add, it's also true, maybe not in a life-threatening way, but it's also true that the propaganda is working against people voicing these kind of voices from coming out of Israel. The machine is really strong. So it's no wonder that you don't get to hear those voices.
And just one more note on the population in Gaza. I mean, they are being bombed and starved. So the expectation of perfectly formulated statements against various things is maybe a little presumptuous on our side.
In my mind, I was referring to West Bank,
Yeah.
occupied, not Gaza, but...
The voices exist. There's a community. These are the people we amplify. These are the people that we look up to. The voices in Gaza also exist. Here and there you'll find a video, and then if you keep watching, a week later you'll find a video of the same person who was speaking out against Hamas being now beat up or shot. So we really have to keep, in mind what the prices people pay and how privileged we are to still have a First Amendment.
And just because we're at the Other Israel Festival, if you watch a lot of the movies in this festival, you will hear all those voices.
Absolutely. And just to say two very concrete aspects of that. Number one, so in between the first and second tours of Standing Together, Omdim Be'achad Na'akif Man, here after the 7th, the BDS movement, created an opposition to Standing Together. And usually when that happens in our spaces, which it does frequently, which is a big question that I have about tactically why do that, because Standing Together was the first major NGO in Israel to call for ceasefire. So it's sort of, I don't totally understand why pick them. But they also responded. There was a letter from the Palestinian leadership of Standing Together in response to the BDS opposition, explaining, we're on the ground, we're trying to create a popular demand. And I think that sometimes those internal Palestinian disagreements feel too risky to, it's what we used to call air the dirty laundry. It feels difficult to air those disagreements at a time of so much violence and oppression. And yet there are examples of that also happening publicly, like in this case of BDS and Standing Together, representing one of the big divides between diasporic communities and on-the-ground communities. I will say that myself personally, my best friend is a Palestinian rapper. He lives inside Israel, and his film Junction 48 was here many years ago with Udi Aloni here at Other Israel Film Festival. His name is Tamer Nafar, and he was, other than my family, the first person to call me after the attack on October 7th just to find out if my family was alive. And activists that I've worked with for many years in the West Bank, like Issa Amro, who, if you haven't met, you will meet through an upcoming film by Tomer Heyman about him, called on October 8th to ask. He knows that my mother was a founder of a kibbutz along the Gaza border and wanted to make sure that she was alive. And thank God she is. The people who forgot to ask that question were the girl who called me to yell at me about what NIF had or hadn't said about Zionism or anti-Zionism. And so, there's just that reality alongside all of the discourse realities.
We have a question here.
Hi, I don't have a question, I have a few statements. First of all, I respect very much what you're doing. And look at it, 3 women. What are we missing in Israel right now? 3 women in deciding position. That's why it's happening. Hello? All we see is men, fighting, we have to kill them, and that's the reality. Now, I'm very disappointed in the Israelis. I mean, I'm an Israeli, I live here, and I live in Tel Aviv. I'm spending 3 months out of the year, every year in Tel Aviv. I didn't go this year. I cannot stand the position of the Israelis. We're talking about left, there's no left. If you listen to the parties, to leftist parties, they all say, oh, but we have to say that Sinwar started it and all this shit. Instead of, talking about ceasefire, you got to do it. So what are the practical steps? My practical steps from the beginning, I told them, you got to go to The Hague, first of all. And, oh, no, The Hague, they don't know what The Hague is. Now, the arrest warrants are very good because it scared Netanyahu. I was talking about it for months. They don't understand it. They think it's against Israelis. I'm talking about filing a lawsuit against Netanyahu right here for a civil lawsuit. They're all saying, what are you doing? So that's the reality.
Well, the U.S. has started targeting specific Israelis who really enforce some of the worst parts of the occupation, and also companies. And we, as people who are here, need to make sure that more of that happens. That's one answer for you.
The government is out.
I think we have time for one more audience question.
Hi, just wanted to say, first off, thanks to all four of you on the stage, as far as like the stuff we're talking about in terms of, you know, the toxicity of the discourse and everything. I actually, like, as a progressive left-wing Jewish activist in New York, I've actually seen what I think are the beginnings of a paradigm shift. And I'm always trying to figure out, you know, to what extent is this just in the Jewish community, right? We're at the JCC now, versus like I'm also involved in left labor stuff. But I think that you all have, in a very real way, played a part in bridging the pro-Palestine and the pro-Israel, and to show, in fact, those things are one and the same. I like concretely seeing Brad Lander show up like week after week at your protests, or the fact that I was actually able to connect some hostage families with a staffer of Bernie Sanders to just to have conversations. I think there's interest more and more in what what we're all doing. So does that resonate? And what do you think about like some of the New York or American political implications of the really powerful work that you're all doing?
When you said you're involved also in labor, the reason why I reacted when you said Brad Lander's name, I was about to just jump in and say, let's get Brad Lander elected. And New Israel Fund is a 501c3. We don't endorse any candidate.
Well, there are a lot of mechanisms here that are open to Americans because of our political system, which are not open to Israelis or Palestinians, obviously, who barely live under a political system with any access or rights. So, you know, I always, as someone who organized here on the left before for other issues, encourage people to take as full advantage of those as possible. And we have also been doing some work around that. None of these things are surprising, but with persistence, we know that for other issues they've worked. So definitely call your representatives, call them every day. Really? You know, there's the story, as a friend of mine said to me yesterday, this is like the worst and longest like Netflix series ever. There is some new low point every day where you can call your elected representatives and say, the US should not be doing X. Bernie Sanders, that you mentioned recently, like really formulated so beautifully a really balanced approach to the absolute toxic implications of American arms being sent over, but one that still preserves, you know, for us as Israelis sitting here, obviously we know that security is actually a real threat. It's not only in Israelis' minds, but it preserves the defensive parts while, if it ever managed to happen, taking away the weapons that only make this right-wing fascist government all the stronger. So without people, your friends, that's why grandmothers are so awesome, because they do this all the time, calling every day, this isn't going to happen, and especially for those who have friends and relatives in other states, maybe slightly less progressive or liberal states, talk to them too and get them to do it. I mean, that is something which for us is not hard, and it is hardwired into our political system.
On this stage, on opening night of Other Israel Film Festival, it was the Q&A after the film The Other by Joy Sella, and the panel included Osama Iliwat, who was from Combatants for Peace and now has a new initiative called Salt of the Earth, where he's public speaking alongside Rotem Levine for peace and reconciliation. And somebody asked, which I always say as an NIF person is my favorite thing that always gets asked on every panel, what can I do to help? So somebody in the audience here asked, what can we do to help your efforts? And he said, stop sending weapons. If the US can't support our peace, at least stop supporting our wars. And it was like, we are stakeholders in it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, and just to mention ALMEP, which is the Alliance for Middle East Peace, which includes over 160 organizations, has this statistic that I love, which is for 12 years before the Good Friday Agreement, international communities spent $44.50 a person per year on peace efforts. In Israel-Palestine currently, it's $1.50.
I have to bring it to a close, right?
Do you have a last question?
Yes, I will always have a last question unless somebody wants to jump in on the last thing. No. Okay, so now I'm going to ask my favorite question that is ever asked on any panel, which is, what can we in this room here do to stay in touch with you, to participate in or support Israelis for peace? And from your perspective, what should we be doing to support peace?
Well, first you can follow us on social media and see a lot of videos of amazing speakers and peace activists from Israel and Palestine who came to our protests and share their message. So we are Israelis for Peace NYC on Instagram, Israelis for Peace on NYC on Twitter. Come to our protest. We protest every Sunday at 4 p.m. in Union Square. You can still make it today, unless you're going to see. Oh, yeah, that's right. I should mention, we have very special guests today, and you mentioned, we talked a lot about Standing Together here today, so we're going to have the co-directors of Standing Together who arrived in the U.S. a few days ago for a very interesting and full tour that Tamar is very involved in actually leading. So Alon Green and Rula Daoud are going to be speaking today, and we're very, very honored to have them with us. What else? Remember that unconditional support of Israel is not in any way a support of Israel right now. That's a main thing.
And I have one little thing to add, which is Tamal very modestly mentioned that she runs a direct donation program from Gaza. And even though this sounds like a small thing, the more funds, and it is very difficult to get funds into Gaza now, we can send them, the more seeds of peace are planted. So if you know someone who wants to contribute, if you can throw a few extra bucks, please do.
Yeah, and also, I mean, we have been able to get money in this entire war, and we have been able to do some really substantial things. Last month, we were able to get food baskets to around 70 families, and then 6 loaves of bread and a box of cheese to 600 people. A few weeks before, we built some tents. Like, we're constantly doing this work. I unfortunately can't make it into anything very formal because my friend who does this, who runs this, is very afraid of Hamas. They're not very, they actually attacked her family twice this war, while she was also already running from what we know they're running from. Because it's very frowned upon to be a peace act, to say that you believe in peace and have Israeli friends. And if you're dispensing aid, which Hamas really wants to come only from them, that puts you even higher in the crosshairs. So unfortunately, there's like a growth cap to what I can be doing with her, because we do kind of fly under the radar, but it's still a direct opportunity to help. So find me if that's interesting to you. But also on another level, what people can do, what Americans can do, find an organization that does the work that you support. Support them, amplify them, become a fan of them. And be a broken record. Like, you are very, like, there's an issue of tokenizing, right? Because if I start a conversation, like, as an Israeli, you know, that's already annoying to half the people who hear me. But I don't know how else to start the conversation. So I'm saying, as an Israeli, me personally, tokenize me all you want, but just in the right places. So if you're in a conversation where you're being pitched that objecting this government or objecting the occupation or asking to end this war now is somehow an attack on Israelis, then remind them that A, they don't speak for us. I can barely speak for myself. And B, it's quite the opposite. Like, the propaganda is endless. The messaging is kind of simple on the other side. Ours should also be simple. And to the best of your abilities, I would encourage everyone to resist being a soldier in the narrative semantics war. That war is going nowhere. And it's honestly tedious. If there's a war that we're a part of, it's the war for a better future, because 15 million people between the river and the sea are going nowhere. So if we're standing and demanding justice and a free Palestine, who are the people doing it? Not the people from Brooklyn, the people on the ground. So we either support them and just constantly ask ourselves, is my activism helping? Just constantly take a little periodic test, like we do it all the time. And if it's helping, am I helping the reality on the ground? Is it helping? Well, the cause is one. the maximum amount of human rights to the maximum amount of people in the shortest amount of time. Is it helping that? Or is it helping my image? Because if it's helping my image, maybe it's time to course correct. And if I'm afraid to do something helpful on the ground because I'm scared of my image, maybe it's time to kind of look at the scales again and see what weighs heavier. And I feel like anybody who came here has already made that choice. So first of all, thank you for coming. And we have many Israelis for Peace in the crowd that we recognize, even with a t-shirt. And yes, be in touch with us. Help us spread this message, because leading by example is what our speakers do. So if we have incredible speakers doing the work on the ground, you don't have to do much, just send a video. Like that has its effect as well. But mainly just be a broken record until we can, we're in a better place and we can just change the record. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, Achuti, I think you do a pretty good job speaking for yourself, and I'd be happy for you to speak for me sometimes too. Thank you to my rainbow Israeli friend Tamara, to Tamar and Noah, and to all the Israelis for Peace that are already joined and all the ones that will join. And thank you to Other Israel Film Festival.
Thank you so much, Libby. Thank you for moderating. Thank you, Noah, Tamara. We hope that you stay here, join us for upcoming films. It is our favorite time of the year, and these conversations are what make it so special and a space for nuance for everyone. So either join them at 4 p.m. or we have films coming up here. The Checkpoint Women film is going to be here, and then we have the BB Files later tonight, and we hope to see you at some of them. Thank you.